A luxury restaurant in New York City, chandelier lights glimmering over polished marble floors. A man in a faded shirt walks in holding a paper flower in his little daughter's hand. Guests in designer suits turn to stare, whispers cutting through expensive air. At the center table sits Ava Sinclair, billionaire CEO known for cold perfection. She glances up, certain they have come to the wrong place. "It's okay, Daddy, we can leave," the little girl whispers softly. The man nods, ready to walk away, but Ava stands, voice trembling. "Wait, sit down." That moment changes everything. Daniel Brooks, 38 years old, single father, once a promising engineer who lost his job when his company collapsed in the financial crisis, taking his career and his future with it. Now he worked maintenance for a chain of high-end restaurants, invisible labor that kept the wealthy comfortable, quiet, and humble and unnoticed. The kind of man people looked through rather than at. His 7-year-old daughter Lily was his entire world, a bright child who made paper flowers from old receipts and scraps of colored paper, who always said, "We will be fine, Daddy," with such conviction that sometimes Daniel almost believed her. They lived in a tiny apartment on the city's edge, fourth-floor walk-up with a broken elevator, surviving on ramen noodles and hope, surviving on love when money ran out, which was most months. Daniel worked 3 jobs, maintenance at restaurants during the day, cleaning offices at night, driving for a delivery service on weekends, sleeping 4 hours if he was lucky, running on coffee and determination, and the knowledge that Lily needed him to keep going, needed him to not give up, no matter how hard life pushed. Tonight, he was fixing faulty wiring at Aurelio's, the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan, preparing the venue for a billionaire's birthday celebration. Ava Sinclair, 34 years old, CEO of Sinclair Group, a woman whose face appeared on magazine covers and business journals, a woman who represented everything Daniel would never have. He finished the repairs efficiently, packed his tools, but when he went to leave, the rain was pouring. Buses had stopped running due to flooding. Taxis were impossible to find, and Lily was shivering in her thin jacket. A waiter noticed them in the lobby, dripping and miserable, and made an assumption, thought they were early guests, maybe eccentric wealthy people who dressed down, and led them into the grand dining room before Daniel could explain the mistake. The room fell silent, conversations stopping mid-sentence, heads turning, people staring at this man in work clothes, and this child with her homemade paper flower. Clearly not belonging, clearly wrong, clearly a mistake that needed correcting. Daniel's face flushed with shame. He grabbed Lily's hand to leave, to escape before security was called. But Lily looked up at him with those big, trusting eyes and whispered words that broke his heart. "It's okay, Daddy. We can leave. I am not hungry anyway." Those words, that acceptance of rejection, that willingness to pretend she did not deserve basic dignity, cut deeper than any insult. Ava Sinclair heard those words from across the room, and something inside her shattered. A wall she had built over years of success suddenly cracking, because she remembered, she remembered, being 8 years old, and her mother saying those exact words when they were kicked out of a restaurant for being poor, for having the audacity to enter a place where they did not belong, and that memory had haunted her for 26 years, had driven her to build an empire, so she would never feel that shame again. "Wait," Ava said, standing from her table, her voice quiet but carrying. "You two, please sit down." Daniel hesitated, confused, suspicious of kindness from the wealthy, but Lily was already moving forward, holding out her handmade blue paper flower. "For your birthday," she said with such sweet sincerity. "I made it myself." Ava took the flower with trembling hands, this fragile creation worth nothing and everything, and felt tears threaten for the first time in years. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. "This is the most beautiful gift I have ever received." For the rest of dinner, Ava could not stop glancing at them, at this father who ate slowly so his daughter could have more, at this child who smiled despite having so little, at this quiet dignity that disturbed everything she thought she knew about worth and value. A restaurant manager named Patricia, who witnessed the scene, would later tell journalists, "I have worked at Aurelio's for 15 years. served presidents and celebrities and billionaires. But that night, watching Miss Sinclair give her table to that father and daughter, watching her actually see them as people, not problems, that was the first time I believed wealth could coexist with humanity. The first time I had hope. 3 days after the birthday dinner, Ava tracked Daniel down through the restaurant manager, got his phone number from employee records, called him personally, which she never did. CEOs had assistants for such things, but this felt too important to delegate. "I want to offer you a contract," she said without preamble. 3 months, maintenance work at Sinclair Group headquarters, double your current pay, full benefits. Daniel was silent, suspicious, wondering what the catch was, wondering what she really wanted. "Why?" he asked finally. Ava paused. Unusual for her, she always had answers ready. "Because you deserve better than being invisible," she said quietly. Daniel accepted, not because of pride, but because Lily needed tuition money for the gifted program at her school, needed books and supplies, needed things he could not afford on his current wages, and pride was a luxury he could not afford either. He started work the following Monday, fixing elevators and wiring and plumbing at the gleaming Sinclair Tower, moving through the building quietly like always. But something was different here. People noticed him. Ava had sent a company-wide email about respect for all staff regardless of position, about treating maintenance workers and janitors with the same courtesy as executives, and it changed the atmosphere entirely. Ava watched Daniel from her office window 40 floors up, watched how he worked with focus and care, watched how he treated cleaning staff and security guards with genuine respect, asking their names, remembering their families, being kind without expecting anything in return. And she realized that true character reveals itself in how people treat those who can do nothing for them. And Daniel had more character than anyone in her boardroom. One evening, working late, she found him asleep in the maintenance room, Lily curled beside him under his work coat, the child's homework spread across his toolbox, and the sight made Ava's throat tighten with something she could not name, grief maybe, or recognition, or longing for something she had lost in her climb to success. The next morning, she left a lunchbox on his tool bench, quality food, not cafeteria leftovers, with a note written in her own hand, "Dream big, little one," addressed to Lily, not Daniel, because somehow it felt safer to express care for the child than acknowledge what she was starting to feel for the father. Lily responded with a drawing, 3 stick figures smiling at a dinner table, 2 adults and 1 child labeled "My Family," and Ava tucked it into her planner next to quarterly projections and merger documents. This crayon drawing suddenly more valuable than billion-dollar deals. Daniel started to laugh again, really laugh, not just polite chuckles, started to straighten his shoulders and look people in the eye, started to believe maybe he was not just surviving, but living. And watching this transformation, Ava felt something inside her thaw, some frozen place where emotions had been buried under ambition and fear. She had spent 15 years building walls to protect herself from vulnerability, and here was this man and his daughter dissolving those walls with simple kindness and authenticity. She learned he had lost his wife to heart disease 3 years ago, that he still wore his wedding ring, that grief and love coexisted in him without conflict. He learned she had grown up in poverty, built her empire from nothing but grit and determination, and refusing to accept that poor meant powerless, that she had nightmares about losing everything and ending up invisible again. One afternoon, Daniel brought Lily to the rooftop garden, an employee benefit few people used, and Ava found them there, father and daughter lying on the grass looking at clouds, and she sat beside them without asking permission, lay back and looked up at the sky for the first time in years. "Ms. Ava," Lily asked with childish directness, "what do rich people wish for?" Ava thought about the question seriously, about what she actually wanted versus what she thought she should want. "To be as happy as you," she said finally, and meant it. The blue paper flower sat on Ava's desk beside her gold Mont Blanc pen. This contrast between handmade and expensive, between priceless and worthless, between what money could buy and what it could not. And she found herself looking at it during difficult meetings, during hostile negotiations, during moments when she needed to remember why any of this mattered. Executives whispered that their CEO was getting too close to the help, that it looked unprofessional, that she was risking her reputation, but Ava silenced them with quiet intensity. "Compassion is not weakness," she said firmly. "If you cannot understand that, then perhaps you are working for the wrong company." She did something unusual, started paying attention to employee welfare, really paying attention, not just signing off on HR policies. Learned that many of her staff struggled with childcare costs, with medical bills, with the impossible math of surviving in expensive cities on modest wages. And she created anonymous scholarship funds, paid tuition bills, covered medical expenses, never taking credit, never expecting gratitude, just trying to make the world slightly less brutal for people who worked hard and deserved better. A social worker named Marcus Chen, who administered one of these funds, would later write, "I have distributed charity from wealthy donors for 20 years. Usually it comes with conditions and publicity requirements and ego. But Ava Sinclair's contributions came with one instruction: help the people who need it. Do not tell them where the money came from. Dignity matters more than gratitude." And that changed everything I thought I knew about the wealthy and their relationship to giving. The news broke like a bomb. Tabloid headlines screaming, "CEO Ava Sinclair involved with low-level employee." Photos of her and Daniel and Lily in the rooftop garden. Innocent images twisted into scandal. Rumors spreading like disease through social media and business circles. Investors panicked. Stock prices fluctuated. Board members called emergency meetings. The machine of reputation management grinding into action. And at the center of it all were two people who had just been trying to be human, trying to connect across the barrier society built to keep them separate. Daniel was summoned to a conference room. No warning, no explanation. Just three executives and a lawyer waiting with grim faces. They asked invasive questions about his relationship with Ava, about his intentions, about whether he had pursued this connection for money or advantage. And Daniel sat there taking the humiliation because he needed the job, needed the money, needed to protect Lily from the consequences of his choices. "I have done nothing wrong," he said quietly. "Neither has Miss Sinclair. We are friends, that is all. Friends who respect each other. Why is that so difficult to believe?" When Ava walked into that boardroom, the interrogation stopped. Executives going silent, suddenly interested in their expensive shoes, and she understood immediately what had happened, saw the shame in Daniel's face, the anger in his clenched fists, and felt rage burn through her like wildfire. "If anyone is guilty of anything," she said with deadly calm, "it is me, guilty of forgetting that respect should never depend on a paycheck, guilty of allowing a culture where kindness is seen as weakness and human connection is treated as scandal. Guilty of not firing every person in this room for the way you just treated someone whose integrity exceeds all of yours combined." The chairman, 70 years old and convinced of his own importance, leaned forward with a patronizing smile. "Miss Sinclair, we understand emotions are high, but you must see how this looks. You must understand the optics." Ava met his eyes without blinking. "What I understand," she said slowly, "is that you are more concerned with appearances than ethics, more interested in stock prices than souls. And if standing up for someone who deserves respect costs me my position, then I will lose it standing tall and sleeping well at night." The board voted 12 against 2, recommending Daniel's termination for professionalism concerns, the kind of vague accusation that could not be defended against because it meant nothing and everything. Meant they did not like him, did not like his presence in their world, did not like being reminded that human value transcends bank accounts. Daniel was escorted to his locker, given 30 minutes to pack his tools, security watching like he might steal something, and the humiliation was complete, total, designed to break him. In the lobby, Lily waited with the receptionist who had been kind enough to watch her. And when she saw her father carrying his toolbox, saw his face, she understood without explanation. Children always understand when adults fail them. She squeezed his hand, her small fingers warm and strong. "It's okay, Daddy, we can leave," she said, repeating those words that had started everything, words that meant acceptance, meant dignity in defeat, meant they would survive this together. Daniel nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. Ava watched from the balcony 40 floors up, pressed against the glass, tears streaming down her face. This woman who never cried, who prided herself on control, completely undone by witnessing injustice, by failing to protect someone she cared about, by understanding that all her power meant nothing if she could not use it to do right. That night she did not sleep, sat in her penthouse staring at the blue paper flower, at this fragile symbol of everything good she had almost destroyed by being too afraid to fight harder. Morning came, and with it clarity, the kind of clarity that comes when you stop worrying about consequences and start caring about integrity. Ava called an emergency press conference, showed up in a simple black dress, not a power suit, no makeup, no armor, just herself, and faced a room full of journalists who smelled blood in the water, who wanted scandal and spectacle. "The man you are mocking in your headlines," she said, her voice steady and clear, "is the reason this company still has a soul. He treated our janitors with respect when executives ignored them. He worked 3 jobs to give his daughter a good life. He reminded me what actual leadership looks like, which is service, not power, compassion, not cruelty. And without people like him, we have nothing but money. And money without humanity is just numbers on a screen, meaningless and cold." The crowd was silent, cameras flashing, everyone processing this unprecedented honesty from someone who had built her reputation on calculated perfection. Social media exploded. Finally, a CEO with a heart, trending worldwide, public opinion swinging dramatically. People tired of corporate cruelty finding hope in this story, finding validation that maybe goodness mattered more than profit. But Daniel, when Ava called him, refused to return, refused to accept his job back even with apologies and guarantees. "You do not need me in your world," he said quietly. "I'm just a maintenance worker. I fix things that break. And your world, it breaks people. I cannot go back there, cannot expose Lily to that again." Ava's voice broke. "Maybe it is the world that needs more of you," she whispered. "Maybe the reason it breaks people is because people like you stay away. Let people like me run things. Let cruelty become normal. I need you to come back, not for me, but because your presence makes us better, makes us remember that we are supposed to be human." But Daniel had made his decision, hung up gently, and Ava was left holding her phone, holding her regret, understanding that some things once broken cannot be fixed with money or power or even good intentions. She took drastic action, called another board meeting, and announced she was donating 20% of her personal shares to establish the Blue Flower Foundation, named after Lily's gift, dedicated to supporting children of working parents, scholarships and childcare and medical assistance, using her wealth to prove that Daniel's influence had changed her permanently, that she would not go back to being the ice queen who valued profit over people. During the signing ceremony, she placed the blue paper flower on the podium, this fragile, beautiful thing representing everything she had almost lost. 1 year passed, seasons changing, wounds slowly healing, and the Blue Flower Foundation grew beyond anyone's expectations, helping thousands of families, becoming a model for corporate philanthropy that actually centered the people it claimed to serve rather than the donors who wanted recognition. Ava threw herself into the work with intensity that worried her remaining friends, working 18-hour days, personally reviewing applications, visiting families, trying to prove through action what words could not express, that she had learned, that she had changed, that Daniel and Lily's influence had been permanent, not performative. The foundation's first anniversary gala was held not at a luxury hotel, but at a community center in Queens, Daniel and Lily's neighborhood, and they were invited as guests of honor, though Daniel almost refused, still raw from the humiliation, still protective of Lily, still uncertain whether he could trust this world that had rejected them. But Lily insisted. This child who somehow had not become cynical, who still believed in goodness, who wanted to see Miss Ava again, and Daniel could never refuse his daughter anything, so they came dressed in their Sunday best, Lily wearing a blue dress that matched her paper flowers. Ava saw them enter, and her heart stopped, literally stopped for a moment. This man who had haunted her dreams for a year, this child who had taught her about joy, and she crossed the room without caring about protocols or schedules, knelt down to Lily's level. "I missed you," she whispered, and Lily threw her arms around Ava's neck, this uncomplicated love that adults had forgotten how to express. And Ava held her and cried and did not care who saw, did not care about her mascara running or her reputation for control, just cared about this moment, this connection, this proof that love survives cruelty if you let it. During the ceremony, Lily read an essay she had written for school, her small voice amplified by microphones, reaching hearts across the room. "Kindness is when someone lets you stay, even when you think you should go," she read, her words simple but profound. "Kindness is when someone sees you when everyone else looks through you. Kindness is when someone powerful chooses to be gentle. And that is what Miss Ava did for my daddy and me. She let us stay, and that changed everything." The audience rose in applause, 200 people standing and clapping until their hands hurt. And Ava could not hold back tears, this public display of emotion, from someone famous for never showing weakness. She stepped down from the stage after the formal program, found Daniel in the crowd, whispered words she had been holding for a year. "Thank you for reminding me what real success looks like," she said. "Not money or power or magazine covers, but making someone feel valued, making the world gentler, using whatever influence you have to protect rather than exploit. You taught me that without trying, just by being yourself, just by loving your daughter openly, and I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that lesson." Daniel smiled, really smiled, the wariness in his eyes softening. "And thank you for proving that good hearts can still lead," he said. "For showing Lily that powerful does not have to mean cruel, that wealthy does not have to mean cold. For being human when it would have been easier to hide behind your position, you gave us hope when we had almost lost it." They stood in comfortable silence. Two people who understood each other in ways words could not capture. Two people who had changed each other permanently. The blue paper flower became the official logo of the foundation, reproduced on letterheads and websites and marketing materials. This simple handmade thing elevated to symbol, and every time someone saw it, they remembered the story, remembered that dignity matters more than wealth, that kindness costs nothing but means everything. The story spread globally, other CEOs creating similar programs, other companies examining their treatment of lower-wage workers, a ripple effect from one moment of connection, one choice to see rather than overlook. One afternoon, months after the gala, Ava visited Daniel's apartment. No warning, no agenda, just wanting to see him, wanting to be in a space that felt real after too many hours in glass towers. She found him fixing a fan while Lily baked cookies, flour everywhere, laughter filling the small kitchen. And this messy, chaotic scene felt more valuable than any boardroom, more meaningful than any deal she had closed. "You look more relaxed," Daniel teased, noticing how she had loosened up, stopped wearing armor every moment. Ava settled into a mismatched chair, accepted a slightly burnt cookie, smiled. "Maybe I finally stopped running," she said softly. "Stopped running from feelings, from connection, from the fear that if I showed weakness, someone would destroy me. And what I found was that being vulnerable made me stronger, not weaker, made me human again." A photograph hung on the wall, slightly crooked, showing Lily hugging Ava at the foundation gala, both of them laughing. And beneath it in crayon, Lily had written, "Family means we stay," and Ava stared at those words, at this definition of family that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with choice, with commitment, with refusing to leave even when leaving would be easier. As the sun set through the kitchen window, casting golden light across flour-dusted counters, three people who had found each other across impossible divides simply existed together. And that existence, that simple being, felt like coming home. From today, I choose to look at others a little longer. I will live kindly. Christmas Eve arrived with snow drifting past windows, the city transformed into something magical. And Ava showed up at Daniel's apartment carrying a small tree, slightly lopsided because she had cut it herself at a farm outside the city. Her first time doing something so ordinary, so wonderfully mundane. Lily ran to open the door, squealing with excitement. "Daddy, Miss Ava's here. She brought a tree." Daniel appeared from the kitchen, flour on his cheek from making cookies, and he laughed at the sight of this billionaire CEO struggling with a Christmas tree, at how far they had all come from that night in the restaurant when worlds collided. "Here to save dinner again?" Daniel teased. Because Ava had been visiting weekly, had become part of their routine, their family in everything but name, and each visit felt less like charity and more like coming home, like finding where she belonged after years of searching in all the wrong places. Ava set down the tree, brushed needles from her coat, smiled with genuine warmth. "No," she said softly. "I came to be home if you will have me, if there is room in this family for one more." Together they decorated, hanging ornaments and lights, and Lily insisted on making blue paper flowers to hang alongside traditional decorations. Dozens of them folded from colored paper, each one representing hope, representing the moment everything changed, representing the choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. They worked in comfortable silence, broken by laughter, by gentle teasing, by the easy intimacy of people who had chosen each other, who had fought to be together despite every obstacle society placed in their path. Lily placed the last paper flower on the top branch, standing on her father's shoulders to reach, her small hands careful with the fragile creation. "Now it is perfect," she announced, climbing down, and Ava watched light from the tree reflect off blue petals, watched this symbol of their connection glow in the dim apartment, and felt something settle in her chest, some restless part of her finally at peace. Daniel took her hand, his calloused fingers warm against her smooth skin, this contrast between their worlds that no longer seemed to matter. "We never properly thanked you for changing everything," he said. Ava shook her head, tears threatening again. This woman who had cried more in the past year than the previous 10 combined. This woman who had learned that tears were not weakness, but proof of connection, proof of caring. "You two changed me first," she said. "Changed me from someone who measured worth in dollars to someone who understands that value lies in how we treat each other, in whether we see or overlook, in whether we stay or leave. You taught me that power without compassion is just cruelty with money, and I would give up everything I own before I give up what you taught me." Outside, snow fell heavier, blanketing the city in white, but inside warmth glowed from the tree, from candles on the table, from 3 people who had found family in unexpected places, who had built connection across class divides, who proved that kindness can change everything if you are brave enough to try. They sat together by candlelight, the blue paper flower centerpiece catching the glow, and Lily looked at the 2 adults flanking her, at the family they had become, and smiled with the wisdom of children who see truth adults miss. "It's okay, we can leave," had been words of resignation, of accepting rejection, of believing they did not deserve to stay. But tonight those words transformed into their opposite, into "we choose to stay," into "this is where we belong," into "family means not leaving even when staying is hard." And in that transformation was the entire story, the entire lesson, the entire reason this mattered. Sometimes the words that break your heart become the words that heal it. Sometimes being told you can leave teaches you the value of staying. Sometimes the people who seem most different from you are exactly the family you needed to find. If you believe that healing stories like this deserve to be told, leave a comment and subscribe to HA Stories. We tell stories that should not be forgotten.